All right, we'll start talking about Chapter 1 in the National Strength and Conditioning Association Personal Training Book. And one of the first things we'll talk about are that there's different types of muscles in our body. We have over 600 muscles, and they comprise different proportions of the male and female anatomy, with women having less muscle mass proportionally than men. And there's three types of muscle: cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, and skeletal muscle. And smooth muscle is the type of muscle that we don't have voluntary control over. And that's the muscle that lines our digestive tract, and it causes the intestines to contract to move the food along. We have smooth muscle that lines our arteries and will contract or dilate to divert blood flow to different areas of the body or control blood pressure. And this type of muscle is fatigue resistant. And there again, we're not voluntarily controlling this muscle, it's involuntary. And then cardiac muscle is the muscle that contracts in the heart and causes the blood to be ejected from the heart and sent to the rest of the body and to the lungs. And it is fatigue resistant as well as involuntary. And so our third class of muscles are the skeletal muscles, which is where we'll put our greatest emphasis. And you'll learn the different muscles in your anatomy class, learning their origin, where they insert, which bones they insert on, and what their action is. And skeletal muscle is attached to bone via tendons, which are very dense, strong connective tissue. And when the muscle contracts, it causes the movement of the bones, and that's how we create our movement. It's also responsible for maintaining our upright posture. It can protect our organs. So, for example, the abdominal muscles protective the organs inside our abdomen. Allow us to maintain body temperature because we produce heat with muscular contraction. And skeletal muscle, one of the characteristics is that it takes on a striated or a striped appearance. And this is just a depiction of how a muscle inserts, has an origin on one bone, inserts on another, and causes skeletal movement, or the two bones to either come together or move away from each other. And when we talk about muscles, we talk about different classifications. The agonist is what's called a prime mover. It's a muscle that's primarily responsible for the movement. So when we talk about the biceps, it's responsible for flexion of the forearm, and that's the prime mover. And there's other muscles that aid in that. Those are synergists, the brachioradialis, the brachialis. Those are also involved in flexion of the forearm, but the prime mover is the biceps. The antagonist is the muscle that has the opposite movement or action. So if the biceps is the agonist causing flexion of the forearm, the antagonist is the triceps because that causes extension of the arm. And the antagonist is a muscle that for us to perform flexion by the biceps, we have to have the triceps relaxed to allow us to form or produce full range of motion for that action. But the antagonist also might contract slightly to slow down the movement or protect a joint. So the antagonist, it relaxes, but in some cases it also will contract during the opposite movement. And then I mentioned already synergists. They assist the prime mover. And then the fixators or stabilizers, they are muscles that are usually at the origin joint where the muscle originates, and they stabilize the joint to allow efficient movement. So a when we do the biceps, contraction of the biceps for flexion of the forearm, the um, um, the muscles that hold the humerus or the rotator cuff muscles, they hold the humerus in good contact with the scapula to allow stable movement. So fixators or stabilizers more so stabilize a joint. And so this is just a picture that shows the biceps being the agonist and then the triceps the antagonist, which relaxes when we have the bicep contracting. And this is just a slide, a colored slide that shows the striated appearance. And the striated appearance is caused by the arrangement of the contractile elements of the muscle, or the what we call sarcomeres, which are the basic contractile elements that you will see shorten as a muscle contracts. And so it's this very organized arrangement of the contractile elements that gives it its striated appearance. And so this is what a muscle looks like, and we have these breakdown components. It's comprised of smaller units. And so if you look at the uppermost right hand portion, you'll see where the connective tissue forms the tendon, and that's where the muscle will attach to the bone. And then the muscle belly is the full muscle. And the muscle is covered by a fascia or connective tissue called the epimysium. And that's just a bundling of the muscle belly. And then you see coming out of the muscle belly a tube, which is called the fasciculus. And the fasciculus is there again. It's a bundle of smaller components, or it's a bundle of individual muscle fibers or cells. And this also is surrounded by a wrap of connective tissue, and we call that the perimysium. Then if we go further into the next component, we'll see that fasciculi are composed of individual muscle fibers or muscle cells. So we call them muscle fibers or muscle cells. And they are multinucleated. So you'll see several nucleus running along the muscle fiber. And the muscle fiber runs the length of the muscle. So they're these long cells with many nuclei. And those are also wrapped with connective tissue, and that's called the endomysium. And these wrappings of connective tissue, whether it's the endomysium, the perimysium, or the epimysium, they hold everything intact, but they also serve as insulators. So when a muscle cell is stimulated, only the specific muscle cells or muscle fibers that are to be stimulated to contract will contract, that the impulse does not spread to other muscle fibers which are not intended to contract. And so if you look at these insulating sheaths, if you will, you'll see it also serves the function of, with the muscle that is stimulated to contract, it doesn't, that action potential does not go to other muscles in the arm or the leg, wherever the muscle is. So they also serve as an insulation. The sarcoplasm is like the cytoplasm of a muscle fiber or a muscle cell. But as we continue down through the muscle, you'll see muscle fibers are also comprised of these other small units, which are called myofibrils. And myofibrils contain the contractile units. And so you can start to see on the myofibril on the left there, it starts to show that striated appearance because the myofibril contains the contractile units. And the very smallest proteins, the contractile units, are what are called actin or myosin. So if we were to go from descending order, it would be, we would start with the muscle belly. The muscle belly is comprised of the fasciculi. The fasciculi are comprised of many muscle fibers, and muscle fibers are composed of myofibrils, and myofibrils contain the myofilaments, which are proteins, which are actin and myosin. So kind of memorize the descending order. All right, so if we look at an individual muscle cell or muscle fiber, you will see some components. And first of all, it is covered by the membrane called the sarcolemma. And the sarcolemma, when the muscle fiber is stimulated with an action potential, it is transmitted along the sarcolemma. But the sarcolemma forms these pouches that then dive down interior of the muscle cell, and those are called T-tubules. So that's what allows the action potential to go down into the muscle cell and bring the impulse deeper into the muscle. There's also what's called the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and the sarcoplasmic reticulum is a storage site for calcium. When the action potential or the stimulus is being transferred down the T-tubules, it causes the sarcoplasmic reticulum to release calcium ions. And calcium ions are needed for a muscle contraction to occur. So it stimulates that release. And you can see also the myofibrils, and on the myofibrils are some blue and red lines that are reflective of the contractile elements or protein. Also the nucleus, you can see, and then a cell, muscle fiber also, it has mitochondria. Mitochondria are the powerhouses. They produce ATP when there's oxygen present. And so if we look at the individual muscle cell, here is a myofibril, and you can see that we have an arrangement of contractile units. And the outermost purple is called the Z line. And the Z line consists of sticky protein, to which are actin, which is a protein that is involved in the contraction, is attached to these Z lines. So the small horizontal purple or blue lines are connected to the vertical Z lines, and they just hold the actin in a nice organized manner. And then the center of what we call the sarcomere, which is the basic contractile unit, the sarcomere has these thicker lines, which are called myosin. And myosin is in the center of the sarcomere. And when a muscle contracts, the myosin attaches to the actin and it pulls the actin, so there's more overlap. So these individual filaments do not shorten, it's just that there's greater overlap. So when a muscle contracts, the Z lines pull towards the center and shorten the muscle, and that's what causes the muscle shortening and the contraction.